While the 90s are considered to be a golden age for cinema, there can't be too many hits without a few flops as well. Of course, art is subjective at the end of the day, and many of these so-called critically bad films eventually went on to become cult classics at the end of the day. From early 90s movies such as Hardware and The Last Boy Scout, to some other later releases such as Deep Rising and Event Horizon, many of these films were subjected to great scrutiny by critics and audiences alike. Of course, critics stopped trashing them over time as they rose in popularity and were eventually deemed awesome. And today, we come to you with a curated list of these 90s movies that were initially trashed, but are actually worth a watch. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
You're dead, jolly man.
I told you can't do those.
Hook, 1991. Often regarded as Steven Spielberg's worst creations, Hook was a 1991 American fantasy adventure film starring Robin Williams, Dustin Hoffman, Julia Roberts, Bob Hoskin, and Maggie Smith in the lead roles. Despite having such a stellar cast, the movie was not an instant hit, and fans took quite some time to come around to it. It served as a sequel to the 1911 Peter and Wendy novel and focused on an adult Peter Pan as he navigates his high-powered lifestyle after forgetting all about his childhood. Introduced as Peter Banning, this once popular kid seems to be a successful lawyer who neglects his wife and children in his pursuit of success. However, things take a turn when his old archenemy, Captain Hook, appears out of nowhere to kidnap Peter's family and take them to Neverland. Peter then realizes that he has no option but to revisit his past, and the journey takes him on a roller coaster where he eventually reclaims memories of his past and even grows into an emotionally mature, well-adjusted adult. Upon its release, fans and critics alike stated that the film was sappy and messy, and even Spielberg talked about how he was not happy with its outcome. However, fans realized that this just might be because they had grown up and forgotten the charm of Peter Pan, and that the film does deal with themes of growing older and facing the inevitability of death. It did not take long for the audience to eventually come around and appreciate the way this film sheds light on deeper themes of unrequited love, dysfunctional families, and abandoned kids in a perfectly entertaining package with a stellar cast, stunning visuals, and a catchy soundtrack. Anaconda, 1997, directed by Luis Llosa and starring Jennifer Lopez and Ice Cube in lead roles. Anaconda was a Brazilian-American action-adventure film with some horror undertones. The film included other actors such as Jon Voight, Jonathan Hyde, and Eric Stoltz, among others, and it followed a documentary film crew as they studied a long-lost Amazonian tribe known as the Xerxamas. As they continue with their shooting, they end up coming across a stranded Paraguayan snake hunter named Paul Cerrone, who offers his help in tracking down the tribe. However, they soon realize that Paul is set on hunting down a legendary green anaconda, and they end up in a whole lot of chaos as they try to navigate the wilderness. The movie has a 38% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, and it was immediately labeled as a bad film with over-the-top sequences and unrealistic plot lines. However, this is a part of what makes the movie so good, and viewers are certainly going to be disappointed if they walk in expecting a classy, well-thought-out adventure film. Instead, the film's chaos and unrealistic storylines make it an excellent B-movie, with sequences where a man tumbles off a waterfall and ends up getting snatched by a snake midair. Anaconda has its own charm, and while it is not critically acclaimed, it surely packs a punch with its quirky dialogue writing and imaginative action sequences that make this film a cult classic. The Last Boy Scout, 1991, starring Bruce Willis and Damon Wayans in leading roles. Tony Scott's 1991 American action film, The Last Boy Scout, had a tumultuous start with the sheer number of rewriters it went through before production. Screenwriter Shane Black had revamped the plot so many times that the movie was already set up to be a failure, and fans felt like it lacked greatly when compared to other action films at the time, kicking off with a sequence of a drug addict football player pulling out a pistol on the field. The movie soon embarks on an adventure as private investigator Hollenbach teams up with a has-been quarterback named Jimmy Dix to investigate Dix's girlfriend's murder. As they make their way through the case, they discover a link between gambling and the NFL, along with many jaw-dropping action sequences involving car bombs, cat puppets, and helicopter blades. While the movie has some clever dialogue writing and an electric pairing as well as scenes where Bruce Willis kills someone with the palm of his hand, it was widely criticized upon release, and fans took quite some time to come around and appreciate this action-packed thriller. Alien 3, 1992. Marking David Fincher's big-budget debut, Alien 3 was a 1992 sci-fi horror film that was set in the aftermath of the events covered in James Cameron's Aliens. The film starred Sigourney Weaver, Charles Dutton, Charles Dance, and Brian Glover in lead roles, and while it tanked in the United States, it did perform well outside of North America. The plot revolved around an ejected pod from a colonial marine spaceship known as Sulaco, which crashed on a refinery prison planet and killed everyone on board except Lieutenant Ellen Ripley. As she investigates the planet, we learn that the ship is also home to an alien egg, and the film takes a crazy turn as the egg hatches in the prison and embarks on a killing spree. Just like other alien movies, the film was centered around a xenomorph outbreak, but there were a ton of production issues that cursed this film and even resulted in its bad performance. After the film went through a bunch of screenwriters and directors, they decided to hire David Fincher and start shooting, even before they finished the script. With very little time to prepare, Fincher had a whole lot of trouble while making the film, especially due to the inputs of other creatives and the studio at large. This ended up reflected in the final product, as fans felt like the movie was not put together, especially after the studio reworked Fincher's ideas and even released a teaser trailer that suggested that the film would take place on Earth. On top of this chaos, critics felt like the movie was a whole lot of style over substance. But over time, fans have come to appreciate how dark and grungy this film came out to be. Fincher did an excellent job with the visuals, and it is quite unfortunate that Alien 3 was not very well received upon release. Johnny Mnemonic, 1995. Starring Keanu Reeves in the lead role, Johnny Mnemonic was a 1995 Canadian-American cyberpunk action thriller directed by none other than Robert Longo, marking his directorial debut. Johnny Mnemonic followed the life of our titular character as he undergoes a cybernetic brain implant surgery that allows him to store information, such as confidential files, in his head. Of course, this comes at the cost of sacrificing his own memories when the incoming information has a high data load. And the film takes place in a dystopian setting where society has already been doomed due to a technoplague. In a world dominated by mega corporations, Mnemonic does his best to make an honest living, and the film's premise shows a lot of promise. Unfortunately, the movie's production was nothing less of a roller coaster, as it was initially supposed to be an artistic, low-budget film that blew out of proportion. With Keanu Reeves' recent success in Speed, the studio decided to invest more money in this project, and a low-budget sci-fi thriller soon turned into an action blockbuster. Their budget went from $1.5 million to a $30 million project, which fumbled with the creator's vision and did not sit too well with the fans as well. However, it did not take long for critics and the audience to appreciate the vision and the dystopian storyline that lay at the core of the film, and it is definitely a must-watch 90s sci-fi in today's age. Hardware, 1990. Starring Dylan McDermott and Stacey Travis in lead roles, this British-American sci-fi horror film was directed by none other than Richard Stanley, who is known for his music video prowess. The movie follows McDermott's character as he gives his girlfriend a bunch of hardware, or loose robot parts, to develop her tech-supported physiology, only to realize that he has ended up creating a monster, as he takes the form of a self-repairing robot who goes on a rampage in a post-apocalyptic setting. He realizes that his girlfriend has turned into a bloodthirsty monster who would not stop at anything to satiate her thirst. Upon its release, the movie got into a whole lot of controversy as Fleet Comics sued them for plagiarizing their short story, while critics also gave very harsh reviews that resulted in the film tanking at the box office. Given the circumstances, the creators had to hold back on the DVD releases, and it was not until the late 2000s that people could actually get their hands on this film. Of course, it soon went on to attain cult classic status as soon as people actually started watching it, and fans especially appreciated the subtle ways in which the film comments on fascism and apartheid. Deep Rising, 1998. Directed by Steven Sommers, Deep Rising was a 1998 American action horror film that starred Treat Williams, Famke Janssen, and Anthony Hale in lead roles. It was a classic monster movie wherein a crew of sailors find themselves navigating their way through the South China Sea when they come across all kinds of deep-sea creatures that have been waiting for prey to wander their way. The movie adds another layer of twists as this crew clashes with a high-end cruise and eventually join hands to get to the root of these mysterious creatures and safely make their way across the sea. While Deep Rising sounds like the perfect adventure film, there were a whole lot of issues during production as several actors dropped out of the film days days before the shoot schedule. With very little time to assemble a new cast, the creators did not have much choice but to make the best out of the situation, especially with a low budget. As a result, the movie did not leave much of a mark when it first came out, but over time, fans have appreciated its classic, goofy B-movie charm and elevated it to a much-watched status. The 13th Floor, 1999. Loosely based on Daniel Galoui's novel, Simulacron 3, The 13th Floor is a 1999 neo-noir sci-fi film that stars Craig Bierko, Gretchen Mol, Vincent D'Onofrio, and Armin Mueller-Stahl in the lead roles. It was directed by Joseph Rusnak, and it even earned a couple of nominations for Best Sci-Fi Films at the time. The movie did not have any specific issue, and it had a fairly engaging plot, as it was set in a virtual reality simulation of Los Angeles, where people navigated their way through this simulation, with themes where one could take control over someone's body through their artificial consciousness, or even connect to VR systems to get inside people's heads. The 13th Floor had an intriguing premise and a stellar cast. Unfortunately, the movie had the worst luck of all time, as it was released just about 2 months after the release of The Matrix, which completely won over the sci-fi genre and overshadowed this film to such an extent that people only discovered and talked about it years after its release. Hackers, 1995, starring Johnny Lee Miller, Angelina Jolie, and Jesse Bradford in lead roles. Hackers was a 1995 American crime thriller directed by Ayin Safdie. The film followed a team of high school hackers who found themselves involved in a corporate extortion conspiracy, and many would even call this movie a little ahead of its time. Since the internet was a fairly new concept to the general public, the film did not sit well with audiences, who had a hard time grasping how one could commit crimes through a screen. However, the film eventually went on to receive cult classic status, as fans discovered it over the years, and finally understood how the film was way ahead of its time. It had some popular dialogues, such as, "This is our world now, the world of the electron and the switch," and "My crime is that of curiosity," which are often quoted by die-hard fans of the film. The actors also did a stellar job of breathing life into their role, and even went as far as to study computers, meet actual computer hackers, and even work as technical consultants and attend hackers conventions in order to add a touch of authenticity, which certainly reflects in their performances and makes this a worthwhile watch. Event Horizon, 1997, directed by Paul Anderson and starring Lawrence Fishburne and Sam Neill in leading role. Event Horizon was a sci-fi horror film that received a lot of criticism for its similarity to Alien, Hellraiser, and 2001: A Space Odyssey. However, it eventually gained a reputation as a unique piece of contemporary sci-fi media, and the movie was set in the near future where humankind had colonized the moon and many other planets in the solar system. The plot mainly revolves around a bunch of astronauts who were sent to salvage a long-lost starship known as Event Horizon, who embark on this mission to learn that the starship's crew had been massacred while the ship had turned sentient. However, Event Horizon seems to have traveled through a dimension of pure hell, and the astronaut crew find themselves in a tough spot as they realize the ship might be after their lives as well. While the movie was a failure at the box office, the visuals and gripping plotline eventually caught the attention of sci-fi fans out there, who popularized it to the point where it has become a cult classic. Marvelous verdict. And with that, we have explored the top 10 90s movies that were judged a little too harshly upon their release, only for them to go on and attain cult classic status with time. From action thrillers, such as Hook and The Last Boy Scout, to adventure films, such as Anaconda. We hope this list gave you a few recommendations for your next movie night. We would also love to hear your thoughts on this curated list, as well as any other trashy, well-loved 90s film recommendations that might have slipped under our radar. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Have a good one.